Test, test. Hello, hello. It is 11 PM London time. I haven't got a stream out in a fair while, and I did promise a couple of people I'll get one out. Better late than never. Going into the last 3 sessions of the week. Asia, London, New York. It is the last opportunity for us to delegate risk or to remove it from the table. So I'm going to cover the primary pairs that I will be trading, that I'm going to be looking at, etc. Cover some ideas, some setups, some contingencies and invalidations, starting with GBPUSD, as you can see on the screen. What we will do is a top-down analysis. Okay, we'll work through the entire chart, we'll understand what each of the levels are demonstrating, and then we'll speak about how we can play them. Okay, so what have we got up here? Equal highs. Alright, 1.34222. We know there's liquidity, stops resting above them. Any of the optimized sellers from this week have their stops resting above these highs. Okay, coming all the way down to these lows here. These are the lows of the week, the ones that we formed Tuesday night. We know that any optimized buyers have their stop losses resting below there. Okay, so we have our optimized highs, our optimized lows. We know where the biggest liquidity is being drawn to. Okay, the biggest regions of liquidity. What we've got next, resting on the upside. Firstly, we've got these relatively equal highs that we formed in the Tuesday London session. Just above this, okay, it's in confluence with a little imbalance that we've left at 1.340. And just below this level in confluence with top VWAP, we have the 1.33700, which is yet another imbalance, also in confluence with top VWAP. Okay, the area at which we're currently trading is Wednesday's London high. Okay, in confluence with mid VWAP. The VWAP in question is anchored from the weekly highs that we formed on Monday. Okay, so that is kind of the summary of where price is trading and what we're looking at in terms of how we can trade it or what we're seeing. Okay, we have Wednesday's London high, or the high of Wednesday in general. We've tapped above there going into the end of New York. Okay, we're having slight curvature. What we would like to see is maybe another run above these highs early into Asia, showing some wicks into the upside, showing this rounded off formation, showing demand for sells. If we were to do that throughout the Asian session, early into London, you could look to take a sell setup upon a breakdown back below the VWAP. Okay, the VWAP is being respected quite continually, alright, and it's plotted out very, very nicely. So I'm going to use it to help delegate my entries if I'm going to take this short. What I mean to say is, the way this is right now, just taking out the highs or taking out the stops above Wednesday's highs is not enough for me to take a trade. Okay, I also need to see the curvature, I also need to see the wicks into the upside, and I also need to use the VWAP as my baseline for the entry. I need 3, 4, 5 factors of confluence then at the trades, not just, you know, tapping out the highs and some bullshit like that. Okay, so in terms of GU, the first trade opportunity is if we show more of a bearish edge throughout the Asian session early into London, we can execute a sell-off using the VWAP as our baseline, let's say from 1.333, okay, this area here. Were we to take these sells in terms of our targets, okay, we have this area of volume right here, 1.32700, this is going to be target 1. Target 2, primary target, is going to be the weekly lows. Okay, so if I were to map this out, how this trade would look, stops above the high, target 1, 2.0 risk to reward, target 2, 3.3 risk to reward. Okay, that's the first potential setup on GU. Alternatively, okay, what we can see is these equal highs up here, these equal highs here, which are in confluence with a volume imbalance, and this imbalance in confluence with top VWAP are all on the table, especially this equal high and the equal high above, because we have a lot of stop losses that have not been run whatsoever resting above them. So in the event that price is going to hold at the VWAP and instead we have this curvature to the downside, okay, we show wicks into the VWAP, we show demand for buys, then price could potentially start pushing above into one of these levels here. In the event it does that, I would probably not look to take sells from up at these highs. for the main reason there's not going to be a lot of time left in the week for us to actually generate a profit on this move. Okay, so the optimized move, if we are going to continue to the upside, would be demonstrate this curvature, demonstrate wicks into the downside, fill this very short-term imbalance that we have in price, and we can look to potentially take impulsive longs in the London session, again using the VWAP as our baseline. That could look something like this. Okay, and that is an impulsive long setup that you could take. What you'd want to do when price comes into the first imbalance, roll your stops up to break even. Okay, when price comes to this area, take profit 1. If price comes to these highs, then it will likely rocket above and look for this 1.34500 to 1.34300 zone as you take profit. From a risk point of view, because of where stop loss placement and target placement is going to be, we would prefer to take the sell setup where we have this deviation here, and we target into this volume, and we target into these lows. With that said, we don't just predict price, we react to price. Okay, we'll react to what price is offering us. I would prefer the sell setup, but I'm going to just respond to what price is offering in London, depending on what is provided in Asia. Okay, so that's my analysis on GBPUSD. Two potential setups. The VWAP's going to be a main factor of confluence for me, along with some of the intricacies of the price action and whatnot. That will be GBPUSD. Okay, I think just to maintain the theme of things, we can see EURUSD have somewhat of a similar setup. Okay, so we have, if we were to have this short bias, right, I'm not going to go through all of it again, but if we were to have this short bias, we anchored the VWAP from the highs. VWAP was respected on Wednesday. Okay, now we've left this 30-minute imbalance, which we traded into once, traded into a second time. We're respecting the stop losses. What we could potentially see here on EURUSD is one more drive, tap into the VWAP, respect the VWAP, and then confirm back beneath this area. If going into London we're confirming below 1.1397, then we can look for the move to the downside into the 1.1308. So the way this would look from a risk perspective would be something along the lines of this. Your stop's just above the high that is formed, and you'd expect price to make a move like tap in, hold below, push down. Okay, if I were to extend this out, something like this, guys. Okay, 3.2 risk to reward setup. Your intermediary target, if I were to plot out, this is the low that we formed in the New York session, and much like with GBPUSD, we kind of have this cluster of volume at the 1.13390. Okay, so our target 1 would be in here for about 2 risk to reward again. So very similar setup idea, thesis, and entry and risk dynamics on GU and EU, which is very, very common. You're going to see these pairs move in tandem quite frequently. They are both USD denominated and they have a overlapping sessions, so always going, not always, but likely going to run in tandem with one another. Okay. So euro, practically the same concept that we have on pound dollar. Okay. Alternatively, as we had with the pound, if we start holding above these highs, we hold above the VWAP, we turn this into our support, then we can look for a push up, firstly into 1.14400, and then secondly, it's going to be into this area here. So let's plot this out for you. In this zone right here, between 1.14900 would be your secondary target. Okay, this area of volume. Very similar setups on GU and EU. I would focus on taking one or the other. You don't need to put your focus into both charts. They are going to move in a similar manner. In terms of which one's the optimized trade, I do see a bit more weakness on euro, so if the sells do present, euro might have the higher EV, but both trades basically providing the same setup. If you were to lock in on one of them, you should be able to catch a move in London, whether it's the impulse buys to take out the highs, or whether it's going to be the continuation sells to wipe out all the lows. Regardless, GU and EU super simple setups that you can run with, that you can look to execute in London. My trading plan is going to personally include regular partial exits throughout the day. On Fridays is something that I quite frequently do. A little tip that I'll share with you is because I just don't want to get trapped with risk on the table late into a New York session before the week is going to close. I do try to quite frequently take partials along the way and manage my position with a bit more frequently and of a bit more of a meticulous nature than I would on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, for example. That's something else to keep in mind if you do execute a position that I've broken down. Okay. What we can look at next, BTC. So what I was seeing on BTC, I mean, yesterday I caught sells on Bitcoin, which I'm not going to break down. I think there's a video coming out on that. But today I didn't actually execute these, but I gave this out for those in the Discord. Were potential buys on Bitcoin. Super simple setup. If we look here just on the 30-minute, we can plot out this. Even down at 15, sorry. It's a little bit cleaner. We can plot out this gap on the 15-minute candle. You can see we traded into it on Wednesday New York session. We swept it early into the London session today, and off of this sweep I recommended a long bias into the 94,000 region. Reason being, we fully filled this gap. We fully filled the extremities and the lower echelons of this gap. We showed great demand for buyers down here with the 2 wicks and instantly being bought back up, and we spent such little time at these lows that they were, relatively speaking, good lows. There wasn't many stop losses that are going to be resting below them because not many people got to enter the position. So a move to the upside was, with a trend continuation, was the more sensible move in my opinion. Reason I didn't execute the trade is if we wanted to get into the finer details, what I was actually looking for is, once we had this push up, was a retest into this box here. As you can see, we got like fractions of pips away from it, so I didn't get my own entry, but I know a couple of you guys did in the Discord. So that's what I was seeing on BTC. In the longer term on BTC, I do tend to have a sell bias on the longer term horizon. I don't think the low is set at 74k, though I could be completely wrong. I'm definitely open to the idea that I'm proving wrong. And I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of that, but I see Bitcoin potentially pushing up into 96, 97k, well, let's say 95 to 97k before we want to reevaluate some swing sells or something of that nature. So on Bitcoin for the time being, I believe the alpha is in the intraday, the intra-session trades for the time being until we start trading into this 95k and above. Once we start trading into that zone, or start trading below the 90 to 1,900 zone, then Bitcoin's going to be in like this area of decision where we're actually going to be interacting with some significant areas of volume. But for the time being, we're in this volume gap in a sense, where price is going to move fluidly within each session, and that's where the alpha is going to be. That's where the the value is going to be on Bitcoin. So I'm not going to give another setup on Bitcoin, but I would look for it to trade into 94k before moving back to the downside on like an intra-session basis, and then on a slightly higher time horizon, I'm looking for Bitcoin to still push up into 95s and higher. Okay, I'm not going to go too deep into that. Gold, however, I think I do have quite a few things to break down. So gold, as you can see, I had some longs plotted out. Again, I've not got to hit an entry on them, which is a bit of a shame because it did have a nice little move straight after. In terms of what we're looking at, we have these lows from last week on the Thursday. Okay, before gold made this absolutely rocket move to the upside. On Wednesday in the New York session, we crashed below these lows. Okay, showed wicks to the downside, curvature, demand for buyers, sorry, and hence we had the reversal off the open. We left this gap, had a violent move to the upside, what I was anticipating is that we're going to have a retest into this gap, which, by the way, if I were to plot the fib level, is in confluence with our fib pocket, okay? I was looking for a retest into that gap, also in confluence to the bottom VWAP, and then rocket from 3300 into 3386. Unfortunately for me, what we had is just a sweep of this pre-London low in New York, and then just a straight rocket to the upside, looking to trade into the VWAP area of interest right now. In terms of what I'm seeing on gold, I still would like this gap fill at one point or another. The questions are going to be, is it going to be filled this week? If so, we're going to be looking for sells into the gap, okay? If in terms of how we can execute those sells, we can either execute them up from 3386, or we can use the VWAP as the baseline. With that said, on gold, because of this move that it's made, especially in more of the latter and more liquid hours of the day, I'm not interested in taking an impulsive move on the Asian session. I'm going to allow this to mature for the for our Asia to look to execute in London. Something that we might see on this zone is in some way or another form some type of range across the Asian session for a few candles. If we can get a spike of the range highs back into the range, we can look to sell. Alternatively, if we get this range and spike of the range lows and back into the range, we can look to take buys up into the 3386. So on gold, because of the violent move we've had in the latter hours of the day, it's difficult for me to jump straight back into another trade, especially in Asia, without further confirmation and further data being presented. So on gold, I'm going to allow this to allow Asia to mature, potentially build a range, and then we can look to take a trade. In terms of the targets, 3386 is the target if we're looking for upside and looking for buys, and 3300 is the target if we're looking for downside and looking for sells. Okay, that is how I am looking at gold. I think I would like to finish with GBPJPY. How long have we been going? Can I get a timer of any kind? 20 minutes? Alright, we can probably finish up on GJ. So, what I'm seeing on GJ right now, 30-minute chart. Okay, we've taken out all the highs from the past few weeks across the majority of April, by the way. So a lot of the board has been wiped on this in essence. In the immediate term, we have these highs that we formed late on the Wednesday's New York session. We've kind of made equal highs across today's New York session, which has now been rocketed through. Okay, what I am looking for the optimal position is for this to now have a slowdown in momentum. Okay, across Asia, a spike pre-London, early into London, and then start pushing to the downside. Once we have the confirmation below this 190.300, if we can confirm this deviation, we can demonstrate weakness in price, we have this push to the downside and underside retest, I can look to execute sells on GJ. In terms of what my targets could be and how I could look to set this trade up, if I were to plot like such, my stops are going to be above the high, whatever high we form. Let's say it's 40 to 50 pips. Target 1 is going to be into these equal lows that we formed early into London and New York today. Alright, it's going to be about a 100 pip move, 2.3 risk to reward for target 1. But once we start moving below these lows, we're in kind of a free fall in a sense, okay? If we start getting below this area, especially if we start moving below 189.0. As I mentioned, I do like to take profits continually across the day on a Friday, just because of the day of the week and stuff like that. So I would also use 188.600 as an intermediary target for 170 pips, and ultimately this 187.44600, which is 280 pip move. In terms of just a Friday for the next 3 sessions, this target is pretty unrealistic. I don't want to carry risk over the weekend, so we're going to be prioritizing these lows that we formed today across New York and London, and if we do have a push below them, then we'll look for the extension into 188.600. okay, but on GJ, if we can present the relative weakness and general sell dynamics within the individual candles, candle dynamics that are indicative of weakness, etc., then I can look to execute sells once again during the London session, maybe pre-London if a move starts happening slightly earlier. Look for this sell to the downside. Firstly, filling in these equal lows. Secondly, we potentially look for the imbalance down here. Okay, pretty consistent theses across the board. Nothing concrete. In terms of a buy idea, I don't really have one for GJ. I mean, the idea really would be that we fill into this gap down here, and then we can push back to the upside. But I don't think the risk dynamics for this long is very great for us. Stops are going to have to be a bit too wide, and the next upside target isn't as desirable as some of the downside targets that we have. Okay, so I'm not even going to entertain the longs. If this type of move occurs, I'll allow it to occur, and I'll fixate on my other pairs. I have a lot of ideas. I'm going to look to execute at least one or two of them for tomorrow's remaining sessions. My general gut instinct is just to leave Asia alone, okay, and allow it to mature. Get on pre-London, figure out what Asia did, figure out where volume is resting in the market, and then make your decisions and make your reactions based off that. That's going to be all for me for the time being. Appreciate anyone watching. Like, subscribe, comment, I don't know, any of that rubbish. Do all of that stuff. I appreciate it. I might get another one of these out on the weekend. Potentially look at some higher time frame work, higher time frame charts, and see how it's all coming together. But that's all for me for the time being. Highly appreciated. Anything that you want to see from me, DM, comment, etc. See you guys. Take care. Trade safe.